I'm 70 years old. That's 7 decades of living, working, failing, learning, and gradually discovering what really counts. I want to talk to you as someone who has traveled the path ahead, not as an expert, if you are watching this. I have made several financial errors over the years. However, the most important things I ever learned had nothing to do with increasing my income. Their goal was to live in greater tranquility. I won't be discussing stock market timing or chasing wealth in this video. I'll talk about the subtle but impactful facts that I wish someone had taught me when I was 50 or even 60, because the amount of money in a bank account has no bearing on the type of retirement that offers true security and happiness. The first step is to alter our way of thinking, and that change is critical for many of us, particularly in America. Today, there are far too many elderly people who lack preparation. Some people depend on their kids. Some feel confined by growing expenses and diminishing savings. I wish to assist in making that difference. Let's have an open discussion about money, aging, and creating a truly wealthy life. First, the great unlearning. How I made my life and finances simpler. Retirement is frequently portrayed as the culmination of decades of arduous labor and a reward. In actuality, though, it felt more like a reset for me. I wasn't simply quitting my work. I was leaving behind a lifestyle that had influenced me for more than 40 years. That required a lot of unlearning. Unlearning the behaviors of accumulating, spending, and doing all the time. And I discovered something unexpected throughout that unlearning: liberty. Allow me to return to the first issue I addressed. It had nothing to do with money. My wardrobe was there. I had spent decades working in workplaces that required me to wear suits, ties, polished shoes, and the entire professional uniform. I had enough business clothes to dress the modest gathering. However, I discovered I didn't need any of it when I opened the wardrobe one morning, a few months into retirement. I was no longer dressing to impress. I had no intention of going to meetings. Why am I still living the way I am? I wondered. I began shopping for my own wardrobe that day. I discovered trousers I loved but had hidden away and shirts I had forgotten about. I stopped purchasing new clothes unless I really needed them, and when I did, I went to second-hand and thrift stores. For a little portion of the cost, I discovered excellent products. Above everything, I was relieved. The expense that accompanied the obligation to look a certain way has silently disappeared from my life. The driveway was the next stage. I've always owned 2 cars with my wife. Both of us were employed. Both of us had commutes. In retirement, we were often together, which made sense at the time. The most of the time, one car remained idle and continued to accrue maintenance and insurance expenses. We went back and forth for a few months before selling the second car. The genuine gift arrived every month, although the lump sum from the sale was good. Lower expenses, less headaches, and one less thing to manage. Another lesson came from our pantry. Purchasing in bulk made sense for years. We were providing food for a family. Our daily routine included crates of canned foods, enormous sacks of rice, and enormous jugs of olive oil from warehouse stores. However, those same things were going to expire before we could finish them when it was just the 2 of us. In the end, we threw away food and money along with it. We eventually canceled our membership in the warehouse club. We now purchase smaller servings from our neighborhood market. It feels more sustainable, more intimate, and unexpectedly more reasonably priced. Then there was our house. Weekends were when we rested during our working years. We cheerfully hired someone to clean the house, mow the grass, and make minor repairs. However, retirement provided us with something we hadn't had in a long time. Time. I began mowing my own grass. Once a week, my spouse and I started thoroughly cleaning the house. It began to feel like a blessing after first feeling like a chore. Yes, we were saving money, but we were also exercising, maintaining an active lifestyle, and feeling closer to our surroundings. It wasn't always simple to go through this enormous unlearning process. It is difficult to break habits that you have had for the most of your adult life. Here's what I discovered, though. Maintaining the lifestyle you enjoyed while working is not the goal of retirement. It is about redefining what constitutes a good existence in the modern era, and now for the unexpected part. I needed less when I had fewer possessions. I felt more liberated when I had fewer responsibilities. I also felt more optimistic about the future as my budget grew easier. Cutting apparent costs like automobiles, clothing, and club memberships was just the first step, though. The hidden costs, those that creep up on you as you get older, were what I did not anticipate. They can also erase years of meticulous saving if you are careless. I want to discuss with you the most unexpected financial difficulties I had after turning 70 in the following segment of this video. The ones that surprise you, not the ones you anticipate, like groceries or bills, because we must be ready for what we cannot predict in order to safeguard what we have worked so hard to create. So stick with me, because you might be able to rescue your retirement with the next lesson. The second is the cost of stealth. Managing the financial surprises of old age. Most people think of things like groceries, energy bills, or perhaps an occasional vacation when they consider retirement expenses. Indeed, those are genuine. However, in my experience, predictable expenses are seldom the biggest risks to your financial tranquility. They are the stealthy, silent ones that you don't notice until it's too late. They are what I refer to as the covert costs of retirement. They can deplete your savings more quickly than you could have predicted. I promise. I'll begin with the most important of all, healthcare. Now, most of us are aware of the high cost of healthcare. It's not news. However, you still have significant gaps even with Medicare, which is, incidentally, a blessing. When my wife and I started looking into long-term care, it was the biggest surprise. We were aware of our aging. We wanted to be ready. We were astounded by what we discovered. In a skilled nursing facility, the average annual expenditure is more than $125,000. Additionally, that figure is increasing by almost 5% annually. Although 5% might not seem like much, it soon adds up over a 10-year period. According to statistics, women will require long-term care for roughly 3.7 years, while males will require about 2.2 years. When you multiply that by those yearly expenses, you find yourself facing a six-figure expense that has the potential to completely deplete your retirement funds. Everything has to be reconsidered: downsizing, long-term care insurance, etc. However, this was the most important lesson. You can't simply hope to maintain your health. Things will eventually change. Therefore, you need to have a financial and emotional plan in place for that time. The house you dwell in comes next. For many of us, our homes are the source of our identity, comfort, and memories. However, they are not usually designed to adapt to the changes that accompany aging. I recall slipping a little on the stairs one afternoon. Just a fright, not a fall. It was sufficient to make me realize that I might not always be loved by this house. We therefore began making little but significant adjustments. Grab bars were added to the loo. We installed a walk-in shower in place of one bathtub. We even started setting aside money for future, more significant changes. Perhaps a ramp or even a stair lift. These modifications go beyond safety. They have to do with liberty. They let us remain in our house for as long as we want on our conditions. And that level of independence is well worth the money. Inflation is another silent worry in retirement. Now, I hardly noticed it while I was working. It didn't seem like a huge deal. A few extra cents for milk, perhaps a larger cable bill. However, every price increase feels personal when you are on a fixed income. Particularly in regard to medical care and prescription drugs. Healthcare expenses have increased almost 40% more quickly than the overall cost of living since 2000. For retirees, having to choose between groceries and medication is not only annoying, but also risky. Speaking of price increases, I was totally unprepared for this one. Auto insurance. I assumed it would be less expensive as I grew older. For a while, that was the case, but after I turned 60, my premiums gradually began to increase once more. Older drivers are viewed by the industry as more dangerous. Your rates may rise by 10 to 20% between the ages of 60 and 75. It doesn't break the bank on its own, but when you combine it with rising medical expenses, upkeep for your house, and inflation, the maths becomes difficult. I learned a basic lesson from all of this. Retirement is not a time for passivity. Now is the moment to take initiative. You can't merely concentrate on the large, apparent costs. You must delve further and examine those who ambush you. I want to be explicit. I'm not trying to frighten you with all of this. I'm saying this to get you ready. Because you are powerful when you are ready. You are able to make deliberate choices. A safety net can be constructed. You are able to keep your peace. Now take a breath if you're feeling overburdened. You're not by yourself. The majority of us were never instructed on how to budget for these unforeseen expenses. Fortunately, there is a path ahead. It's not ostentatious. It's not quick. However, it is strong. I'll discuss the financial practices that have given me the most peace in the following segment of this video. Habits based on perseverance, consistency, and values rather than wealth or good fortune. I can assure you that your retirement plan is not insufficient or that it is too late to make a change. Your entire perspective could change in the next few minutes. Let's continue. 3. My dull route to financial tranquility. I'll tell you something that could surprise you. The most significant financial choices I've ever made weren't quick, clever, or ostentatious. They were actually rather dull. A lifetime of doing the little, consistent things that accumulated up over time. No hidden formulas, no unexpected windfalls. Additionally, they provided me something far more significant than excitement, even though they might not make headlines. They made me feel at ease. Allow me to clarify. I never received a sizable fortune. I've never made millions of dollars selling a company. I paid my bills like everyone else, had a regular job, and received an average wage. However, I began to grasp something at some point, most likely in my late 30s. Having financial tranquility has nothing to do with your income. It has to do with how consistently you use what you already have. I refer to it as playing the long game. Living below your means even after receiving a rise is part of the long game. It entails refraining from impulsive purchases and considering whether they will be significant in 5 years. It entails making consistent monthly investments regardless of the state of the market. In my early 40s, I recall setting up automatic contributions to a retirement account. I never stopped, even if it wasn't much, maybe $100 or $200 a month. I simply persevered through the highs and lows. And those small investments expanded gradually at first, then steadily, and finally considerably. It's similar to planting a tree. You water it even if you don't see anything at first. After a while, you realize you're sitting in the shade of something that has been growing silently for decades. My investment strategy was influenced by the same mindset. I saw friends and coworkers rush into whatever was trending, invest in equities, cryptocurrency, and house flipping. A few of them earned fast money. Some people lost everything. Early on, I made the decision that it was better to be cautious than sorry. I had a straightforward plan. Limit your investments to broad, diversified index funds and a small amount of real estate. That was all. I didn't follow fads. I didn't attempt to time the market. I simply persevered. Was it thrilling now? No. However, it allowed me to sleep at night. I never worried about losing half of my savings as I slept. I was aware that my investments wouldn't immediately quadruple. However, I was also aware that they wouldn't crash overnight. Particularly when you become older and can't afford to start over, that kind of consistency is undervalued. However, it goes beyond investing. If you want to call it that, the daily decisions hold the true secret. The tiny, frequently unseen choices we make on a daily basis that eventually add up to something significant. For instance, my spouse and I hardly ever went out to eat. Cooking at home was fun for us. It was less expensive, healthier, and, to be honest, more fun. We made our own coffee, packed lunches, and viewed meals at restaurants as an event rather than a daily occurrence. Those savings accumulated over time, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of connection and health. We took public transit when we traveled into the city for events like dinners, concerts, museums, or outings. You would be shocked at how many establishments, from grocery stores to movie theaters to hotels, offer senior discounts, something we have consistently requested. Even while the savings were occasionally modest, just a few dollars, they mounted up. More significantly, they reminded us that there are benefits to growing older. We also formed the practice of checking our money on a frequent basis. We would review our monthly expenditures over a cup of coffee, not as a form of self-punishment, but to maintain awareness. What happened to our money? Were there any items we could cut without going overboard? These little get-togethers become a part of our routine. They provided us with clarity, which led to confidence. This is the reality. You don't have to be wealthy to feel safe. All you have to do is be deliberate. Today's serenity is not the result of a single significant event. It was the result of hundreds of thoughtful, deliberate little choices. I wish I had started sooner if you are listening to this. Allow me to express this softly. It's never too late to start acting morally. You can develop new behaviors at any age, 55, 65, or 75. Your future self will be grateful for the decisions you make now. Thus far, we have discussed money, including how to spend, save, and safeguard it. However, there is another difficulty that is entirely related to the people we care about and has nothing to do with money. Because failing to manage your funds might occasionally be the most difficult aspect of retirement. It involves establishing sound limits with family members. I'll discuss some of the most challenging discussions I've ever had in the next segment of this video, along with why one of the most important financial talents you'll ever need is the ability to say no with love. 4. The most difficult discussions. Establishing financial limits with family members. Retirement money management is one thing. Managing your financial ties presents a completely new set of challenges. And for a lot of us, it begins at home with our kids and grandkids. Let me be clear now. I adore my family very much. I would stop at nothing to ensure their safety, happiness, and security. But as time went on, I came to see that saying yes all the time was not love. It made things possible. And I did more than simply safeguard my retirement when I eventually learnt to say no with integrity and kindness. My family received a gift from me that they never anticipated: responsibility. Allow me to share a personal tale with you. We kept our children on our family cell phone plan when they moved out. It made sense at first. In all honesty, we simply did not consider it, even if it was simpler and less expensive. However, little changed as the years passed. We continued to pay more than $200 a month for a 4-line plan. For adult children who were completely capable of covering their own expenses, that is more than $2,000 annually. According to a report I once saw, more than 1/3 of millennials continue to use their parents' phone plans. I hesitated. Did we support our children or did we hinder them? Were we being kind or did we fear confrontation? So my wife and I sat them down one day. We informed them that they would have to switch to their own service plans in 3 months. We volunteered to assist them in comparing prices and shopping around. However, we were explicit. They were now accountable for this. Although the conversation was difficult, it was essential. And you know what? They did a better job than we anticipated. Actually, I believe that since we established boundaries, they respected us more. However, not all conversations are so easy. The requests can occasionally be more substantial. A loan to aid with a down payment, pay rent, or provide support after a divorce. Saying no in those situations feels like a sign of indifference. However, that is untrue. In actuality, you can have a strong sense of concern and still safeguard what you have created. I've picked up a few useful phrases throughout the years. These could also be helpful if you have trouble establishing limits. The first is, I need to talk it over with my spouse. This offers you space, even if you already know the answer is no. It changes the decision from being made by you alone to being discussed with others. Additionally, it demonstrates to your loved one that you respect their desire and that you work as a team to make financial decisions. The second is that the current situation is tight. This is a polite and truthful way to describe your circumstances without delving into specifics. Living on a fixed income is common in retirement, and it must continue for decades rather than just a few months. By framing things that way, you make it clearer to others that you have limited resources. The third is that, for many of us, the majority of our funds are invested in long-term savings. It is not intended for retirement funds to be liquid. There are fines and repercussions for taking money out early. By stating that it is difficult to access your funds, you establish boundaries without coming across as harsh. Does this imply that you will never be able to provide financial support for your family? Not, of course. However, assistance ought to be deliberate. It ought to be affordable for you. Furthermore, it need to originate from a place of power rather than duty. I have one suggestion if you decide to assist. Clearly define the phrases. Declare it to be a gift. Put it in writing if it's a loan. Decide on a repayment schedule. That may be uncomfortable, but I assure you that it will stop much more discomfort in the future. This is another thing I've discovered. You are not ending your relationships when you establish financial boundaries. Deeper honesty is being made possible by you. Your loved ones are being treated like competent adults, and that is among the best ways to show respect, because this is the harsh reality. You don't own your retirement savings. It is your future as well. It is your house, your health care, and your tranquility. Giving it away too readily could put you in a difficult situation later on, and the people you are trying to protect might not be able to assist you. With affection, I say all of this. It is lovely that we were raised in a generation that values sacrifice. However, retirement is not the time to give up your security for the comfort of others, particularly when there are other options. It is not selfish to set boundaries. It makes sense. And our generation is full of wise people. Having stated all of that, allow me to ask you a question. If we don't use our money for the things that really matter, what good is all of this planning, saving, and safeguarding? I wish to discuss that deeper purpose in the following and last section. Not only how to handle your finances, but how to use them to support a happy, fulfilling, and liberating life. The actual return on investment is number 5. The true purpose of money. You begin to view money differently after a lifetime of earning, saving, budgeting, and investing. During your working years, money may seem like the objective, something to strive for and develop. However, you come to a deeper realization after you retire. The goal is not money. It's the instrument for creating a life worthwhile. Let me be clear about this. Your goal in retirement is not to have the largest bank account when you pass away. Your goal is to spend these years as healthy, happy, meaningful, and connected as you can. I refer to that as the true return on investment. Let's begin with your health, which is the cornerstone of everything. Exercise seemed like something I should do when I was younger. I now see it as something I get to do because every stretch, every stroll around the block, and every nutritious meal goes beyond my feeling better today. It's an investment in my future self. I can enjoy life more when I don't have to take as many medicines. I can avoid needing assistance for longer if my legs are stronger. That independence is invaluable. Spending money on a gym membership or fresh food used to seem unnecessary to me. I now consider it to be preventive medicine. Paying for walking shoes and blueberries now is preferable than paying for wheelchairs and medical expenses later. Then there is something that is equally, if not more, significant than health. It serves a purpose. You don't simply lose money when you quit your job. A portion of your identity may be lost. That sense of routine and necessity can disappear in an instant. Additionally, you may fall into a state of silent melancholy if you are careless. I've saw it occur. I have personally experienced it. For this reason, I think every retiree should have what I refer to as a purpose portfolio. What is included in it? You decide that. Mentoring a younger individual in my prior field is what it means to me. It involves working as a volunteer in the neighborhood library once a week. Learning to take pictures is something I've always wanted to do but never had time for. These items provide me with something greater even though they don't pay money. You see, purpose is what gives you a sense of direction when you wake up in the morning. It serves as a reminder that you still have something valuable to offer. Lastly, there is the biggest investment made by any individual. I read something from the Harvard study on adult development that I will never forget. It is among the longest studies of human happiness ever carried out. They reached a straightforward conclusion after more than 75 years of investigation. We stay happy and healthier when we have strong relationships. Forget about it. Not cash, not a status, not the number of degrees you have or the number of nations you have traveled to. The most important thing is to connect. I now invest in connections in the same way that I invest in a retirement fund. I check in and give friends a call. Every week, I organize a lunch with a neighbor. Every month, my spouse and I throw a game night. A few folks, some appetizers, and lots of laughter. Not fancy. Despite everyone's busy schedules, we find time for family video calls. We accept invites more frequently and write genuine letters to longtime friends because the return on that kind of investment is happiness, which is felt right away. This is the reality. Money provides you choices, but health, love, and purpose offer you life. I don't want to reflect on these years and say, well, at least I was financially stable. I want to say that I made use of my money to survive, develop, connect, and feel important. I thus hope you will ask yourself this question, regardless of where you are in your retirement path and whether you feel confident or uncertain. What is the purpose of all this preparation? What is the ultimate objective? Because money should do more than just sit in an account once your essential requirements are satisfied. It ought to encourage a fulfilling life. And each person's version of that life is unique. It's travel for some. For others, it means raising a grandchild, establishing a garden, or remaining near home. This chapter can be spent in a variety of ways. However, there is an incorrect approach, allowing shame or fear to prevent you from appreciating what you have earned. There's more to these years than merely getting by. They focus on thriving in the areas that are most important to you. I'll give my final views in a moment, along with a question that I hope you will respond to in the comments. Let me leave you with this for the time being, though. You worked hard for decades. You deserve to live a kind, sensible, and purposeful life. Instead of pursuing the life the world tells you to, use your money to support the life you were destined to live.